Network modernization is a critical step for digital transformation at government agencies and also for state agencies in particular. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and on behalf of StateScoop, we're here to talk today with Chris Rein, Chief Technology Officer for the state of New Jersey. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Nice to talk with you.
Chris, maybe you could start out by just briefly describing the scope of your responsibilities, and then I'd love if you could address how has the adoption of cloud and multi-cloud computing really impacted your work, particularly around networking requirements?
Sure. Wyatt, in New Jersey, our structure is such that the Chief Technology Officer, my position is since about 5 years, we have been made a full cabinet level agency. And so that gives, the at least the visibility and the collaboration with all of the other cabinet heads, agency heads and commissioners. So our agency, the Office of Information Technology, that's my team, we're responsible for all of the infrastructure, the enterprise infrastructure for the state. So for the entire executive branch. In that role or in that agency regard, I would certainly say that a new evolving set of skill sets are clearly necessary and have been, cultivated within the state OIT. Certainly, our priorities include, building a strong foundation within the cloud as we're transitioning some existing applications to the cloud, and we're growing new applications wherever feasible in the cloud. So clearly that strategy of communications has to take into account our statewide data centers on-prem, as well as our cloud traffic.
Well, and again, thinking about your networking requirements, what would you say are your top priorities over the coming year to improve the performance and scalability of your networks? And also, how will cost versus value play into your acquisition plans?
Sure, Wyatt. The obviously among the priorities, in this position in 2023. One would have to say that security is top priority, and it is. In my role with the Office of Information Technology, I partner very closely with the head of our Office of Homeland Security. That the Homeland Security within New Jersey has responsibility for, we could say, all things cyber, and we have a strong partnership of the operational as well as the monitoring, detection, and prevention functions. So that's a clear priority: security. Also, and I'm sure almost all of our listening state agencies and involved state agencies learned that during the pandemic, the last 2 or 3 years, we also learned that state governments are doing business a little differently now, or a lot differently now. And so any network solution that we put in place has to accommodate how we do business today. New Jersey has a hybrid remote and on-premises telecommunication policy. We're working with our governor's office and our Civil Service Commission for that. That's going very well. And so, it's that blend of all things that are representing today's way of doing business and accessing our statewide resources. Wyatt, to the second part of your question about the build, I characterize it in part as a build versus buy, right? We really have to be as prudent as possible, not for any individual procurement, but also for what that leads to in the future, in terms of assets that are going to be persistent, assets that it makes more sense to lease or buy on a subscription service. That certainly factors into it quite prominently. And I guess lastly, we talk about the value and how we can optimize driving value for the taxpayers and the residents of New Jersey. A balance of being modern, and modern implies more secure platforms and technologies as opposed to old and legacy platforms. Those exist. And it's a key part of my job to make sure that we optimize that as best we can and try to, balance the legacy that we've inherited and how we modernize that in a cost-effective manner.
Well, I appreciate your outlining that, and interesting to hear about the collaboration with the Homeland Security folks also in New Jersey. Let me dive a little deeper in one area. You mentioned security. Can you highlight a couple of examples of where you're investing in new ways to provide greater security protections into your networks and again across multiple agencies that you support?
Sure, a few come to mind. In particular, we can think about the procurement aspect of technology that plays into this. And then from an operational, monitoring, and forensic aspect of it, I would say all of those are pretty critical to the operation and to our strategy. We have implemented within our procurement processes a triad of dealing with new contracts and re-reviewing existing contracts for security posture of our vendors, for the security practices, and for how well they conform to a document that we have called the SISM, the Statewide Information Security Manual. It's a very broad, based on the NIST model, the 853 model, and that was authored chiefly by our Homeland Security Director. And so we work closely there, and we make sure that no technology is purchased or procured without a very careful review of the technology needs, the confidentiality, the availability and integrity of that data, all of those, right? The key buzzwords, but they're also practical guidelines for us. So in addition to the procurement aspects that we've made sure that we address, modern best practices, we've also adopted within the past year and a half, a more consistent and cross-enterprise way of doing business. Our remote access platforms, we had a quite heterogeneous set of tools and technologies that we used. Now we're centering on one technology and one technology platform, as well as our endpoint detection and response. We have a very active EDR monitoring, and that plays into our forensic capabilities as well. So prior to the past year and a half, 2 years, we really never had that single pane of glass that operationally I could present, or we as agencies could present to Homeland Security for an effective cross-the-board tool. And we now have that. And it's all but 100% implemented across the executive branch. So those are exciting, I think, improvements that we've made. Must be vigilant every day, but those are some of the tools that we consider priorities.
Well, it sounds like you've taken a number of key steps. And then lastly, it's interesting you were talking about acquisition. And, as agencies continue to embrace more of a multi-cloud environment, it alters the acquisition process as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing to speed up your network modernization procurement process? And additionally, what key points are you still experiencing working with technology partners on the other side of the desk?
Yeah, really terrific question, and one could go into extreme depth here on this topic. I would say at the highest level, 2 areas that we have done a lot of work with within the past, I would say 2.5, 3 years. One is in the area of contracting, and the other one is in the area of the technology reviews and technology, if you will, approvals, let's say, for purchases of technology products and services across our agencies. On the procurement side, much of New Jersey's procurement law is anchored in statutes and legislative directives, right? So it's not like, let's say, the director of purchase and property has extreme latitude and discretion. There is some, but in much of our guardrails, if you will, are anchored in statutes. So we're working with trying to make some changes to those statutes, as well as find multi-state and common technology contracting vehicles like the NASPO type of contracts, which many states are taking advantage of, wherever possible, and we can leverage them, that really shortens some of the procurement window from a contract perspective. We set up standard contracting terms with our vendor partners, and then we can execute that and leverage that multiple times. So that's one area where we're really looking at. We have some hardware related contracts, some services related contracts, and some software focused contracts, and a blend of them. So I like to think that what I've seen here, I've been in this position for almost 5 years, and I have seen a shortened duration, and happy about that to be able to serve our agencies. Very quickly, we've also tightened up and shortened some of the technology review and technology approval processes. We're trying to take an enterprise view, but we know that one platform doesn't meet all 35 state agencies' needs all the time. So that's a balance. So we're trying to put some enterprise processes in place where we're trying to find common platforms and commonality so that we can have buying power, as well as we can have more common skill sets that we can share among the executive branch. So those are probably among the main areas that we've really focused on to make technology procurement as optimized as we can.
That's fantastic, and appreciate your outlining those in detail for our listeners. Well, Chris, Rein, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share some of the things that you're working on for the state of New Jersey to improve security and network modernization. Really appreciate your joining us.
My pleasure, Wyatt. Thank you.